Good afternoon, and thank you. That's quite a bit of information to talk about today, so we'll get right to it. Thank you for having me. What I'm going to talk about is the growth of the doctor, and it's a condensed talk. Trying to pack in a lot of material in a very short amount of time, so I apologize. What I'm going to talk a little bit about is the personal development of our students, as well as then as the professional development, and finally some practical applications. I guess a caveat of sorts, this is not an evidence-based discussion. This is more of a conceptual, heuristic discussion, based on some papers and some scholarship out there, as well as some thoughts that I have. So just put that out on the table. All right, and I should say all this is couched in terms of thinking about student professionalism from a developmental perspective. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit more of what I mean by that. And I'm hoping my talk will lead naturally into Dr. Landau's talk on wellness in particular as one aspect of professional development. So the first issue is, what is identity, right? Because in a sense, right, we are creating a new identity in our students, that of becoming a doctor. And it's very much a change of identity. Your name is changed forever after, Dr. So-and-so, etc. And this is a bunch of elements that go into what establishes an identity. And it includes sameness and continuity, that's probably the most evident, but also a sense of communality, that there's a unity of how I see myself and how my culture, the people around me see me. And there's a sort of a tension between my inner sense of who I am and what the people around me, what my environment says. So there are a lot of different elements that go into identity. Yes. Yes. Well, invigorating, right? Because I think that it's kind of hard to characterize, but I think that there's a way to be the same, but not blandly so, right? There's sort of rather than a flat line same, it's a same hovering around the baseline with some energy to it, and occasionally going up and down as well, diverting from that baseline. That's kind of how I see it. It's also sort of yes, I am. Yes. Yeah. So yes, I think it's a good point because I guess continuity and sameness, we're not machines, so there is a sense of energy and invigoration. And I think there's a lot of that sense of there's a dynamism in this definition, not just in your sense of self, but in the exchange between yourself and the environment and the people around you, and in your ideals. And in some sense, let's see, yeah. So identity can kind of be a two-way street. These two bold arrows here, sort of who I think I am and who I think people think I am, somehow goes into who we are. I mean, I would add that this sort of fainter one, who people actually think I am, rather than who I think people think I am, if you're following me, is probably related as well to identity in a very hard to explain way. And then there's the idea of an identity crisis. And I think that this is where it start to see where this conversation definitely relates to our medical students. Identity crisis generally is thought of as a negative, bad, moment, but in fact it's a critical moment, as Erika wrote, a necessary turning point, a crucial moment when development must move one way or the other, marshaling resources of growth, recovery, and further differentiation. So in some sense, an identity crisis is a moment in time where a person needs to make a choice along a developmental path, and ideally it's an opportunity for growth, and sudden and uncharacteristic growth. And I think that applies to our students. If you go way back to what an infant faces, these are some of the developmental challenges that an infant faces in forming their own identity. And I put this up here because I actually think that you can think about every single one of these items and think of it from the perspective of a student. It doesn't necessarily just have to be a medical student, but certainly to our medical students. Expanding the needs and possible sources of satisfaction, finding new and meaningful ways to feel good about themselves, widening their social radius, being introduced into a new medical school class and a new faculty and a new kind of medical community. Obviously differentiating their capacities, and I won't go through all of them, but I believe every single one of these actually really probably has a place all stages of our lives as people, but certainly I think bears on that of our students. And in that sense, yes.
So point number 6, given the turning point of identity, it could be just a greater psychosocial challenge rather than strength.
Well, I guess going back to feeling like an optimist, I think in the face of challenges, hopefully we become stronger.
But your identity definition suggested that there might be not the marshalling of resources to achieve.
Well, I mean, ideally there's the marshaling of resources, where, right. It's an ideal. Yes, it's an ideal. And that's where we have all of our support services to help those who don't actually marshal all the strengths that they need. Absolutely.
So they're not challenges, they're opportunities.
Yes. Definitely opportunities, right? Right, there's supposedly, it's often said that I actually don't know if this is true, but some of the Chinese characters for crisis is danger plus opportunity. I've heard that that's actually not actually true, but it actually sounds good, and so I would go with that. So in some sense that there's a child in all of us, which I say not to be too saccharine, but I think is absolutely true, and that in some sense we should be looking for the child in our medical students, or in this case, these are my kids. No pressure. Okay, and then you're thinking about jumping ahead to adolescence. There are these so-called Ericksonian stages of psychosocial development. In adolescence, the major challenge, Erikson has written about this, sort of the major challenges that face people across all the stages of their life. In adolescence, it's about identity versus role confusion, right? We sort of all are probably quite acquainted with the maelstrom of being an adolescent and figuring out who you are, etc., and the tensions that leads to with parents or caregivers and teachers, etc. So, adolescent, right, is in a very real sense trying to figure out who they are. When we get our students, and I think the average age of our students who are admitted are like 22 or 23 years old, I believe. They're right in early adulthood. So their challenge at this point, presumably their identity is consolidated sufficiently. They figured out who they are. They want to be a doctor. They're a medical student. Now they have a challenge of intimacy versus isolation. Over the first, probably in the 20s and 30s is where this challenge comes in. And that is how to establish bonds and connections and intimate connections versus winding up isolated. And this stage can't happen until you have a consolidated general sense of who you are. You need to have some confidence that you are sort of have enough integrity or stability as an individual to be able to get too close basically to somebody else. And that's why this comes after identity versus role confusion. And when you look at intimacy, all the elements that go into the intimacy part of that equation, I again suggest that a lot of these, almost all these points, can be thought of from the perspective of our medical students. All the things that they need to do in the course of medical school, perhaps except procreate, although that's an option, but affiliate, cooperate, be mutually devoted to one another, to be competitive, to be productive, okay? And what did Freud say a person should be able to do well, to be happy? Excellent. If there were a prize, you would get it. Yes, to love and to work, exactly. All right, and it's simple and complicated all at once. And in early adulthood, right, having sort of rounded the corner into having a stable sense of self, our students are facing challenges about love and work. So at this point in their life, they are trying to embrace sexuality and sexual relationships and incorporating those into one's identity in a more stable, enduring, sustainable way than was possible in their teens, their adolescent years. And their self-image is now expanding to include working for oneself rather than having work imposed on you. Right? We want our students to become more independent and ideally have to not want to shove things down their throats. That's where they should be at in their life, and that's where we want them to be. And our students their moral development is evolving. This is from Kohlberg. different stages in how people think about morality. You may be familiar with this, right? But going from early childhood, where you try to avoid punishment, to later childhood and adolescence, where you do things because people tell you they're the right thing to do, to early adulthood, where our students are, the bulk of our students are at, doing what I think is right, figuring out what I think is right, not what others think is right. That's part of what our students are struggling with personally and presumably in the professional sphere. So that's a little bit on personal development. To move to professional development in this sort of quick pace, what is a profession? This is one kind of multi-step definition, right? What is a profession? What is our profession? It's a vocation that's founded in learning or science, that involves abilities informed by understanding, involving application to vital, practical affairs in people's lives, and involves practices that involve new knowledge and experience that's constantly being updated. It has a vitality to it as well, and it has an ethical imperative of altruism. Right? These are all the different elements that go into what is a profession, medical profession or otherwise. And what is professionalism? Dr. Stern is better able to talk about this than me, but borrowing from his book on the subject, here is professionalism. It's probably best characterized in this figure from his book as well. But sort of having these sort of foundation of understanding, communication, and clinical competence, and then these sort of virtues up here of excellence and humanism. This is what we are trying to promote in our students. And I saw this quote, and I liked it a lot because it exactly would jive with my own experience as a medical student. I really felt like as much as anything else, I learned how to act like a doctor and not just think like a doctor, or both, and presumably the two feed off of each other. But I think this is probably the more intangible part of medical education, is how to instill the sense of acting and being like a doctor, and of course in a sincere, substantial way. So professional identity for our students is acquisition of character and skills through being, feeling, and achieving. I think we emphasize both. I think my sense is that at least my own medical education was more focused on the skills rather than the character. The character actually came up more when you showed lack of character. But those are the two things that go into professional identity. And identification is a big part of medical education. Who you identify with, who you want to be, what are the different elements of your identity as you grow into becoming a doctor, and then trying to integrate those multiple identities. I'll give you an example to try to consolidate that a little, make this point a little bit less abstract. Take, for example, a first-year student who arrived 2 days late for a family celebration, explaining that he had his parents' 40th anniversary. Right? So if you go looking at this from a perspective of identity, he has two conflicting identities: the identity of a first-year medical student and the identity of a, let's say, devoted son. Right? Or daughter. So he or she approached this in an either-or way. I will put off the start of my medical education to be with my parents. Very, in some sense, an honorable decision, right? But there's a way to, rather than have those conflicting identities, merge them, right? Say, I will be there on time, and I will take a weekend in late September and have a private celebration with my parents, right? That would be a way to kind of merge those identities. And that's a small example, but those sorts of challenges come up all the time in our professional lives. And how potentially we help our students to deal with those conflicting identities in medical school. Presumably we would set them up well for how they deal with them down the road. There's a really nice paper about the 8 moral paths that we all need to accomplish in medical school. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but written by someone named Knight way back. Oh, I'm sorry. There's actually leftover applause from a failed audiovisual attempt from another presentation, so I apologize. So anyway, the 8 items. Number 1 is and this is not in any particular order. clarifying one's motivation for being a doctor. In some sense, maybe we do that on a regular basis as doctors as well. Balancing competence and compassion. Learning and practicing the art of laughter. I'm sorry for the distraction. Learning and practicing the art of laughter, which is probably one you wouldn't have guessed, but it's suggested, right, the old idea of gallows humor. There's something to it. It's actually very important and vital. Developing a tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. Okay, that I feel like I deal with in my own practice on an almost hourly basis. Working through ideas about death and dying. Finding the path to the wounded healer, which is becoming, increasingly attuned to one's own sense of mortality and vulnerability. The more time you spend around sick and ailing people or dying people. Becoming skilled in ethical reflection. And finally, and that should be the last applause, a knowledge of the soul, right? Some kind of almost spiritual sense that goes beyond a knowledge of liver enzymes. Okay. So, having said all that all those developmental tasks professionally, these are all the challenges to accomplishing that in medical school, to reaching some of these professional developmental ideals. Being a novice, demands in the medical culture, sometimes the so-called hidden curriculum of pressures to be certain ways that may not aspire to these ideals. The burdens of high emotional and workload stress, and then challenges to cognitive and moral development, seeing things that you don't necessarily agree with, or being asked to think in ways you haven't done before. All these place challenges on the professional developmental trajectory of our students. Eric Marcus is an analyst up at Columbia. He actually did a study. He paid students for their dreams. And he got about 400 dreams from medical students and graduate students, and he analyzed their dreams, and he came up with these themes. And it just shows a pretty interesting arc that probably isn't that surprising in the dreams. It seems to bear on our students, or his students' sense of identity and connection with their patients. First, at the first year, you see themes about identification with patients and a sense of heroism. Second year, now in the dreams, much more ideas of pulling sick oneself, right? Probably consistent with dealing with more pathology, and feeling invaded by too much information and anger at the torture of medical school. Third year, shame and rage due to diminished grandiosity and omnipotence, feeling pretty helpless on the wards, essentially, comes out in the dreams. And then fourth year, less identification with the patients and more feeling like a doctor, and actually less empathy. At least that's what he saw in his analysis of the dream. So it's quite an arc. So I show that just to give you a sense of development. And then, again, looking at the long haul, and this is a study that Dr. Stern was involved with, looking at professionalism per se, right? Problems with professionalism in medical school have been shown to presage problems with professionalism down the road when they become licensing issues, medical board issues. And I think in this study, people with professionalism in medical school are more likely to come before a medical board in the future. And I think the particular professionalism issues were shown to have the greatest risk for future problems, were problems with irresponsibility and diminished ability to accept feedback and improve in response to feedback. And having more problems, professionalism problems, not surprisingly, cause more problems in the future. The greater the number in medical school, the more likely you were to have licensing issues in the future. So, to try to quickly wrap up, this is the practical applications part of this talk. I think the idea would be to view professionalism as a developmental concept rather than an inherent trait. And there was a great paper in JAMA a couple of months ago that really put this better than I ever could, about the idea that professionalism isn't necessarily something that you are born with, and is something that needs to be nurtured and fostered. And that's really where when I read the paper, I felt like I was, it was my own thoughts. And there are a couple of ways at least two, perhaps three global ways that when you look in the literature, it talks about promoting professional development and professionalism. One is reflection. Right? Learning without reflection does not promote growth. Right? And there are types of reflection. There's reflecting in action, while you're doing it, on the action after it, and for action before, right? There's multiple opportunities around a given activity to reflect. And the other big way to promote, or the second big way to promote professional development is mentors. Role modeling may even be, the prime method for how to promote the development of our students. Some of the challenges with that is how to identify mentors, how to shape the mentors, and sometimes how to mentor the mentors to be good mentors, and honest feedback from mentors to students, or even about mentors. Those are some of the challenges to having a good mentoring program. And other developmental approaches are having a humanistic curriculum, extracurricular activities, which is another point that was made very well in that JAMA paper on professional development, that the extracurricular, the community surrounding medical schools is a very important part of professional growth. Codes of ethics and health and wellness, which Dr. Landau will speak about shortly. So looking at all the things we have here at Mount Sinai for our students that I think foster professional growth in the most explicit of ways. These are the ones that I could think of, and there are lots of them, and I'm probably missing some of them. These are sort of the big ticket items, ranging from the white coat ceremony at the outset, to the ASM courses, to the LCE, to the Institute for Medical Education, which is about promoting mentors, and our student health and wellness, etc. Some of our, including our support services for shoring up the problems that students may have in their developmental trajectory, and some ideas for the future, hopefully the near future, that we could all be working on, is how to kind of make this all longitudinal and connected, and not just sort of bits and pieces of explicitly addressing professional development. Maybe using simulations to address professionalism, student honor council, professionalism rounds, and I think better recognizing positive professional behavior, not again addressing professionalism when there's a breach, but also when things are going well, to nurture it. And I also think somehow, looking at our extracurriculars, and we have so many of them, but integrating them into how we think about professionalism in a almost a curricular way, and so that they're not just extracurricular. And that's my end of my talk. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Landau, who's going to talk about one area within professional development, and that's student wellness. And then I think we're going to we can take a question. Dr. Stern?
Can you talk about this idea a little bit more on identity development? I think there's a range.
Yeah, I have a pocket. Thank you. How do I... Not a technical genius here. Oh, okay. And then this, right? Okay. Hello, and thank you so much for having me here. Since I became the director of Student Health Center and part of the wellness program, I would like very much to present it to you. It's something new, exciting, and quite wonderful here at Sinai. And okay, the definition of wellness obviously is amazingly complex. I'm quoting the one given by the World Health Organization in 1948, when they're saying, obviously, sorry? Oh, okay. How? Oh, okay, thank you. That wellness is really a state of complete physical, mental, social, I would add probably financial, professional well-being, and not only narrowly the absence of disease and infirmity, which was probably taught before. And my other favorite quote, which has been my motto, I think, always, is mens sana in corpore sano, meaning healthy mind in a healthy body. Ever since, I think the earliest article that I read about issues with physicians and medical students was one from the 1950s. And unfortunately, the same issues are today. Depression, anxiety, isolation, chronic illness, loss of empathy, difficulties forming and keeping relationships, anger, smoking, alcohol, and drug use in response to stress. In the USA, the Mayo Clinic has done one huge study in 2008. Over 4,000 students across the United States, 7 medical schools. There was burnout and there was depression. Things they are not exactly the same, as we all know, but one can lead to the other, and they can coexist. Up to 50% of the students that they have interviewed through surveys had either burnout or depression, and 11.2% of them had suicidal ideations. It was higher than other students of the same age and higher than the general population. It's sad. The UCSF in 2002, the same thing, a quarter of the students, 25% were depressed. University of Michigan, just now in, I think, September or October, came up with yet another study with exactly the same results. What happens? From burnout, depressed, anxious, fatigued, loss of empathy medical students, we will have residents who also report 14.5% depression and burnout when they start, and so much more, almost up to 30 to 40% when they finish their residency. And now what? It will give way to the physicians. All of us, many of us, there was a study done in California 3 or 4 years ago when the physicians reported that they do not have a primary care. Even if they have a primary care, they're not going to follow up. They will not report illness, especially mental illness. They self-diagnose and treat themselves. We have all done that. I know I'm guilty, but up to 300 to 400 physicians commit suicide. It's grim, it's sad, and on our small level, we are trying to do something. Obviously, sick doctors are not it's not a modern issue. This is a painting from the 18th century, a French painter, and it's called The Sick Doctor. The one in black is the doctor who's sick. So, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Becoming a physician, becoming a medical student is considered something, above, put on a pedestal. And the self-pressure and the unrealistic expectations are so much part of it. But there are others. The parent-induced stress and the people who are financing it. This is obviously a very old slide because 78,000, not anymore. Why is it happening? Yeah, well, as we all know, it's medical education itself, and I remember when I was a student and a resident of the days of the giants, whenever you complained, you were told, you think this is hard, you should know what I went through. Is that right? I don't think so. Medical school is hard, life is harder. So they have to learn how to cope. And that depends so much on the student's personality, on the background, on the family issues. Another big issue is the transition from being the very top of a class to being one of the class among everybody else who used to be top of their class. Time management, the new ways of learning, and everything else, medical, mental history, personal problems, and so forth. This will all come together, unfortunately, to create stress and future problems. A very unhealthy competitive climate. Oh yes, we have to be competitive. Yes, this is part of our profession. but it becomes unhealthy. I have students who come to me and said, my gosh, my best friends, we are not friends anymore because we are competing, and it's so, the level is so high that we can't even talk to each other. It's not healthy. So in 2002, when the pass-fail was instituted in many medical schools, has helped, I guess. I think it would be important to do a study and find out if it does something to the stress level. There were wellness programs at all the medical schools in the United States. Actually, the oldest one that I found was the University of Virginia in 1830, when part of the faculty was seeing students and other doctors for free at the university. My alma mater, Albert Einstein, was actually the first medical school to have a more structured wellness program for the students. Most of these are all run either by faculty and or the administration, and the students are part of some of the programs. The mission, of course, of the wellness program, most importantly, is to raise awareness for the students for their physical, mental, and social problems, and to allow them to be in a safe environment and a trusting environment where they will understand that a physician is a human being who happens to take care of other people, but we're still human. And because we are afraid to bring this up, we are having huge problems. We have to recognize the vulnerable, the infant students, and to offer them a very safe peer group where they can talk about all of that. We want to teach them how to cope with stress and all the healthy lifestyle they should learn now and apply them in the future, forever. And alleviate this. I'm a medical student. I have no social life syndrome. We will talk about that later. We don't want them to survive. We don't want them to go and crawl through these 4 years of medical school. We want them to thrive and to be as complete human beings as possible. The wellness program here has started by an amazing, amazing group of students. Why are we unique? Because it's run exclusively by students. We go there and we talk to them. We are part of it, and we are representatives, but they are running it and running it well. They have identified all the wellness areas with the professional, intellectual that Dr. Katz has talked about: emotional, spiritual, physical, interpersonal, and environmental. These are all part of wellness. There is a wellness committee that's, again, all students, medical students, composed of 2 co-chairs. They are overseeing all the activities. They leading the monthly meetings. They address the class meetings, orientation, plan events, overview the events, and review the final budget. We are actually now in transition and recruiting first and second years. They also have a graduate and student representative and a medical school, because we don't want to stop this only at the medical school level, having all the other 400 graduate students. The nutrition representative provides nutrition groups. We have cooking demonstrations. We provide venues for all kinds of, different diets, gluten-free and so forth, and provide general counseling. The treasurer will organize the budget, provide fundraisers. We meet with the student council on a regular basis. IT representative is in charge of the website, which we don't have yet, but we will. And the research representative doing ongoing and new research and presentation. Oh, I'm done. Oops, sorry. Okay, well, among the 3 representatives, I'm one of them. What I do, I help them organize the activities and overview them like we did last year with the wellness fair. I collaborate, I meet with them, we identify health issues. We help with the health surveys. Dr. Katz is the director of Professionalism, and he told you in his great speech what he is doing. And Sashyana, the administrative director of Academic and Student Affairs, who works with the students, again, overseeing their activities. How it is done? Well, the professional intellectual issues to be addressed, they either class meetings or small groups. The students prefer small groups. They kept on telling us. They prefer peer groups. They don't want the faculty or the administration to be there because they feel much safer, which is perfectly okay. They have peer-to-peer mentoring. They are taught time management and new methods of studying. The annual wellness fair, which will be this next year, I guess, in September or October, when everybody will meet the students involved in the wellness committee and learn about all the classes and activities. We also offer massage and exercise classes there. The emotional issues, we are hoping, and it started already, we will have new faculty and more hours at the Student Mental Health Center. There are students giving meditation classes, stress relief methods. We also have spiritual help through the small groups and the Mount Sinai clergy. Our students who are instructors are giving yoga classes. This is the result. We also have wonderful dance classes given by a first-year medical student. As I said, massage classes, cooking demonstration, and nutrition. What's the future? It was interesting, a little bit strange for me to realize that actually there never been official surveys of the students to find out exactly what are the stress factors, and going longitudinal and cross-sectional. We want to do it from the first to the fourth year and compare it with other years. We are working on it, and we are working on it now. The survey is going to be going out very soon. When I talked about the social isolation, well, you are thinking, if they cannot go out, let other students come here. Maybe we can organize classes here and there, groups get together with other medical students from other medical schools. The alcohol, drug, and smoking cessation groups hopefully will start very, very soon. We need to do more presentation and small group discussions about domestic and dating violence and abusive relationships, because unfortunately there are quite a lot. We will have either grief peer groups or individual counseling. A lot of our students have lost loved ones in the last few years, and although they say they are well, they are not, and they need counseling. And another big project, faculty wellness. I have talked actually to my ASM1 colleagues, and everybody is very excited about having at least a Zumba class here. We just need some money to, pay the instructors. Is not all that much. At the end of the day, we want to have very good, very academically versed physicians, but we also want to nurture healers, and we don't want to take the humanism out of them. This is our goal, and this is what we are working towards. Thank you very much. You want questions?